All right, all right. Welcome, everyone. This is the first Streamlit Live where we interview guests from the Streamlit ecosystem. And our inaugural guest is Jeff Kane, the co founder of Trubrics. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, Tony. Hey, everyone. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. We are super pumped to have you here today. And just before we even get started, I just want to, everybody in the audience, everybody viewing, if you don't mind just put in the chat or in the comments where you're tuning in from, we definitely would like to see where everybody's watching us from. And for me myself, I'm hosting from Virginia, United States. Jeff, where you joining us from today?
So I'm joining from Nice in France, and yeah, so Trubrics. We're in between France and London, so in the UK. And today I'm joining from Nice.
Nice, nice, awesome, awesome, great place to be at the moment. We also have Alonso Silva in the comments, connecting from Paris, France. You have somebody close to you.
Exactly.
Nice, nice,
Salut,
awesome.
Alonso.
Yeah, we have Caroline from Streamlit joining from Boston. Cool, awesome, awesome. We got some people streaming in. Yeah, please keep sharing and let us know where you're tuning in from. This is our first inaugural, as I've said, um, YouTube Live, so and LinkedIn Live for Streamlit, and this will be a continuous series where we will be inviting guests from the Streamlit ecosystem to join us and share more about what they're doing with Streamlit. We have Alexander Casimir from Brazil, Bahia. There you go, good stuff. We have Unscripted Traveler, excited to learn about feedback mechanism. All right, we got some interested folks in our midst. Awesome, good stuff, good stuff. So just for housekeeping purposes and just kind of to make sure everything goes smoothly. So if you have any questions throughout this event, please just leave a comment like how you're doing right now. You can leave it on YouTube or you can also leave it on LinkedIn, and we'll be able to answer these questions at the end of the show. So absolutely, you got Popoka. Awesome. Welcome, 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 everyone. So, without further ado, we're just going to kick off the show and let's just get started. So, Jeff, glad to have you here once more time. And can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a founding engineer at Trubrics, as you mentioned, and I'm heading up sort of software and product development at Trubrics. And I've been there for about a year. We started with my co-founder Joel about a year ago, and he's kind of more on the commercial side of things. And I guess prior to Trubrics, I was working as an ML engineer at a company called Artifact, actually in Paris. So Alonso, you may have heard of Artifact. But yeah, basically there, it's a data consultancy where they do a lot of AI projects, and we were helping clients sort of from various industries move models from POC to production. And there I worked on sort of a lot of things, all things pretty much MLOps, from automating training pipelines all the way through to sort of monitoring systems, building out monitoring systems. So yeah, from there I moved on to Trubrics, like I said, about a year ago, and really excited to be here to talk about that in more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. That's quite a journey there of being in this space. Definitely exciting times to be in this space as well. So, you've explained the journey of how you kind of worked in the ML space as well. So, at what point did you kind of get this inspiration with your co-founder to co-found Trubrics? And was there like a specific moment where you were like, "Oh, this is perfect timing, and we should do this"?
Yeah, so this is a little backstory actually, but straight out of uni, so me and my co-founder Joe, we went to uni together at the University of Bath in the UK, and we had always coming up with business ideas kind of all the way throughout uni, and we kind of semi-started a company straight out of uni. Nothing really to do with the AI space. It was more to do with the robotics space because that's what we studied at uni. But yeah, then I moved to Paris, and we said to each other, okay, let's go and get some actual industry experience. And we really wanted to sort of work in AI, so we said, okay, let's go and get some industry experience. He was in an MLOps company in London. I moved to Paris to do more technical side of things, but still in machine learning. Um, And then, yeah, the inspiration to start Trubrics, well, like I said, we'd always wanted to start an AI company, and I was kind of noticing, as well as him, we were sort of noticing very similar patterns. And from our past experiences, and especially mine, I was sort of living this day to day. We were seeing that like AI teams, so the AI teams I was working in, they were sort of not really knowing how their models were actually used. So they were developing models and working really hard on models, and then they would get their models in front of end users, and they weren't really collecting any feedback from them, and they didn't really actually know how their end users were interacting. Did they like certain predictions? Did they not like the model? It was kind of a bit of a blur to them. And I guess the real kind of aha moment came when we saw the rise of LLMs and generative AI during this last year. Because then we saw this problem that we experienced kind of take a whole new dimension. And we really saw that sort of applications that include LLMs, they're just way bigger in terms of scale. Then they have a lot more end users. And the adoption of LLMs is so big that the problem that we were experiencing, maybe from sort of smaller teams of end users using our models, it just became a lot more real, because you had, in some cases, I mean, obviously in the case of ChatGPT, you have 100,000 users using a singular model. It's really important to collect sort of all of those users' feedback, and it's really important to understand how those users are interacting with the model, so that you can start doing something about it. And so, yeah, that was kind of the real moment where we realized that user information is now, it was something very, very important, and it's now even more important just because of the sheer scale of number of users using AI and adopting AI. And at Trubrics, we actually like to call this like we're moving towards a user-centric approach of AI. So it's pretty well documented that there was kind of a couple of steps that led us to this kind of user-centric approach. First of all, we had like a model-centric approach to machine learning building. And when I first got into data science, I remember very clearly kind of, we had a data set, and then it was just about building a model, iterating on a model, trying to sort of tune hyperparameters, trying to change modeling technique, just trying to do everything to your model code that would make your test score go up or make a better model. And then we kind of started to realize with the progress in actual modeling libraries, like scikit-learn, TensorFlow, it started to become easy to actually build models and iterate. And then a couple of years ago, I guess like 3 or 4 years ago, it first came in that actually we should try and hold the model relatively stable and not spend all of our time working on the model, but actually work on time iterating on the data. And then we're sort of moving into a data-centric approach to building AI. And this is kind of still about, this is pretty very well, there's some massive communities and even companies that have been created on the back of data-centric AI. And Trubrics, we want to be kind of on some of the first companies that are actually sort of moving into this new realm, which is more of a user-centric AI. And because obviously LLMs in the most case are kind of trained on all of the data of the internet, here it's about actually, okay, once you've trained these large models, how can you put them in front of users, and then how can you use their interactions with the models and their feedback to actually make those models better.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great background in terms of just kind of having to, because what you're doing at Trubrics, you all are really tackling a very important thing that a lot of people are now realizing the importance of it. Yeah, good stuff there that you're doing that. And we're glad to be able to learn more about this today and how it works internally and how everybody can use this in their apps. And also, I guess just to go back a little bit, you mentioned growing up in, going to uni at Bath, and are you a soccer fan? I know most people in the US call it soccer, but outside the US is football. So, are you a football fan yourself? And what team do you support?
Yeah, I am a football fan. So I'm a Manchester United fan, which is pretty tough times at the moment. But yeah, I'm sticking with them. I know Joel, my co-founder, is a Chelsea fan, so we've got a bit of internal conflict there, but nothing too serious. So
Yeah, It's all love. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm a United fan as well. So yeah, good stuff.
Awesome. Good
Yeah,
man. Good
there you go.
man.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Awesome. So with that as well, you've touched on the reason why that led to Truebricks being founded, right? Because you're solving a very important aspect here. So just trying to get the audience also involved in this, as why user feedback or analytics is why are they important for LLMs in this case, and what are the types of user feedback that could be used?
Yeah, sure. So I guess there's kind of three reasons that we highlight that really kind of highlight, yeah, the importance of user feedback for LLMs. The first one is just in terms of observability. So with user feedback, you can actually use that feedback to identify kind of AI bugs and issues with the model. And a lot of people don't really actually think about this when they think of an end user. They think of like someone who's maybe sort of not very competent and is not going to give you actually useful information. But what we're seeing more and more, especially with language models, is that actually anyone actually using that model uh, can give you some really useful insight into how that model is performing and if that model is actually making an error or something like this. So yeah, the first thing really is just from the observability front. If you're tracking user feedback, you're going to have a much better chance at catching sort of any bugs that are in your AI model, whether that be to do with bias or whether it be to do with just a specific category of prompts. So it's pretty important from that point of view. The second one is in terms of evaluation of LLMs. So this is a pretty hot topic at the moment. How do you evaluate a large language model
Yeah.
or any generative AI model? And I mean, yeah, obviously the issue is that there's kind of no ground truth. You know, if you ask an LLM who's your favorite football team, they're obviously going to say Manchester United. Uh, but that's a subjective answer.
Yes.
And so yeah, the lack of ground truth is a problem. So then you ask yourself, well, okay, well, what do AI teams actually really care about when they're building a model and they're putting it in front of people to do it to tackle a specific task? Well, they actually care about whether those users are happy with the generations that they're reading and whether the LLM is essentially tackling their problem. So incorporating user feedback is a really good way of just evaluating your models. And we're seeing that more and more in sort of monitoring tools like Langsmith and Weights and Biases. They're incorporating sort of user feedback as an evaluation metric. And then the third one would be personalization. So if you're taking feedback from your users, you're much more able to actually create kind of like fine-tuning pipelines to be able to actually tailor your LLM towards a specific group of users. It could be a group of users, it could be an individual user, it depends on the use case and what you're doing. But just actually listening to them is the best way of tailoring your model to their needs. And then in terms of actually like the types of feedback, so again, there's like three types that we highlight. The first one is the most obvious is what we call explicit feedback. And explicit feedback is all about when a user explicitly wants to tell you something. So they've read a model generation from a chatbot, for example, and they're saying, "Whoa, wait a minute, Manchester United is not the best team." So I'm going to give a thumbs down for that response.
Yes.
And that's just that's a piece of explicit feedback that they want to communicate to the team. Now, obviously, most people don't leave explicit feedback. A lot of people will kind of actually not paying much attention to that and not want to communicate directly to you because it's an extra effort, etc. So then we can look at sort of a slightly weaker signal, but something that's still important, which is implicit feedback. And implicit feedback will be more like if a user is kind of copying the generation. Imagine it's a code snippet, for example, that the model is generated to help you build a Streamlit app. Well, if a user is clicking copy on that code snippet and then pulling it in, it can be a sign that they're using that code that is generated by the LLM. and it can be a signal that AI teams want to track. And the third one is actually kind of the most obvious one, which is just tracking simply the user prompts. So a user, like throughout a conversation, by looking at how a user responds to the model, you can see actually whether they're sort of happy with the generations or not, if they're sort of contradicting the model, or if they're still probing to try and understand actually something that the model hasn't quite been able to tell them. So having a really good understanding of the prompts of a user really can give you an idea of what they're talking about, if they're happy or not, and yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
Awesome, awesome. That's a very good description of an explanation of why we need user feedback in our models. For those of us that are working with large language models, especially on the app side of things. So with that as well, and I've interacted with a bunch of models, and I know most of our audience has things like ChatGPT. Sometimes you ask it a specific thing, and sometimes they give you that thumbs down, thumbs up, was it better, worse, or and then you rank it and send
Mhm.
it. So there's stuff that happens in the background that users kind of are not usually aware of what's actually going on in the background. You click thumbs up, or it was bad or good, and then you just continue with your prompting, right? So for Trubrics, can you explain to us kind of like, or walk us through how Trubrics kind of streamlines this process of collecting user feedback directly within Streamlit apps, and also if you can touch on a little bit on what happens in the back end of all this for most of the use cases that you've seen.
Sure, sure. So first of all, yeah, I guess like why Streamlit, and I think it's important to note that first of all, if you're discussing user feedback, you need a user interface, and you need an interface for your users to connect to and actually communicate with whether it be a large language model or any type of generative AI model. And so that UI is necessary, and Streamlit basically makes that very easy to build. So, I mean, I guess a lot of people joining here will know that you can build kind of a chatbot in Streamlit in around 10 lines of code. So it's a pretty powerful way of actually building small apps and getting your models in front of users. Now, the reason we've been working with Streamlit and we've actually integrated, built a big integration with them is that, or with you guys, sorry, is that, yeah, we allow you to basically collect user feedback with a few lines of code and a sort of a friendly connector. So we have this object called the feedback collector, and that allows you to embed UI components into your app, and to just sort of collect feedback from your users. Now, there's different types of feedback. So you can have, like, as you said, in ChatGPT, they have sort of thumbs up, thumbs down, and then as you click on a thumb, you can sort of enter maybe a comment. And there's kind of all different ways that you can decide, and you can elect to actually collect feedback. And in our feedback collector, we've covered the basic ones, and we also allow sort of users to build their own custom ones if they like. And so once you've kind of integrated one of our feedback components, you can, upon a user actually clicking on one of these thumbs up or thumbs down buttons within the Streamlit UI, it's a feedback is sent to Trubrics. And what we're doing as well is we're kind of relaying the feedback, whether it be quantitative or qualitative, and we're attaching that to a specific sort of model version, a model config, any parameters that you may have used, like a temperature of the model, maybe some templates as well that you've used, like a specific prompt template that you're using for a specific use case. And this will allow you then to sort of view kind of how good your different models are across different configurations, and yeah, really sort of evaluate what your users are thinking and how happy they are with, let's say, different versions of model, or different or the same model but across different prompt templates. We also sort of store in their sort of user information as well, so like a user ID or user location, for example, and that will allow that will allow our users to kind of go onto the Truebricks interface, and then they can actually see, okay, well, for users in the US, they're kind of querying the model like this, and users in Europe, they're kind of querying the model in a slightly different way, which can be a pretty interesting insight that you can develop on. And so that's kind of Truebricks is essentially mainly focused on that. It's really about collecting the feedback and then analyzing it and managing it. Now, you touched on fine tuning as well. So I would just take a step back and say, okay, so with user feedback, a lot of sort of AI enthusiasts and people who are building AI models are thinking, I'm only going to integrate feedback into my app if I can actually find a way of automating the way that feedback is taken in and treated by the model. And what we say at Truebricks is that that's in the best case scenario, that's great if you can do that, and in many cases you can. In the case of LLMs, there's obviously some very well-known fine-tuning techniques, and reinforcement learning with human feedback is kind of got massive as ChatGPT was largely trained in that way. But the difference, I guess, with end user feedback and what ChatGPT did was ChatGPT collected feedback in a very controlled manner. And what we're trying to do with Truebricks is we're saying, okay, well, you're sort of opening up your model to all end user feedback, and you'll know that end user feedback is pretty noisy. And sometimes it's interesting, and sometimes users are really telling you something that probably the model should learn from, and sometimes the users are telling you stuff that you probably don't want the model to learn from that. And so one of the pieces of work that we're really sort of focusing on is, rather than actually supplying a whole toolkit for allowing AI teams to integrate the feedback back into the model, we want to basically give them all of the context into, okay, what is this feedback actually talking about, and categorize that, and is this actually useful for you guys to take and to reinsert into your training pipelines. And then once you've done that, then improving the model isn't just about sort of reinforcement learning with human feedback and fine tuning. You can do loads of things with it. You can look into prompt engineering to improve your template, because your LLM might be actually fine and it might be really performant, but the template that you're actually you've built yourself is actually not optimized for what your users are wanting from the template. And similarly, if you've got a RAG system built with an LLM that's going to fetch and query a database, you might realize that inside your database there's not enough data through some user feedback, and you might need to, instead of working on your LLM and feeding feedback into your LLM, you might realize that, okay, actually I need to go and get some more data to another document to supply to my database, so that my RAG system is actually more performant. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit on fine tuning, but I will say just again that we really want to focus on collection and analysis. And then in terms of kind of fine tuning, there's a lot of different ways that you can fine tune a model with feedback, and it's pretty dangerous to create a completely automated feedback loop where you're really feeding in all feedback to your model. And we want to be that filter that helps you select what you feed to your model and what you don't.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very important. Especially because there's just a lot of noise sometimes in this data. Because it's all, especially when somebody has to type something in there. Maybe somebody who just didn't really analyze what or provide really good feedback. So sometimes it just kind of affects more. If it's already kind of like a automated pipeline, then it might actually affect the model more than helping it. And
Absolutely. And there can be some people out there as well that are looking to actually compromise your model
yeah,
and attack your model. And if they know, it's pretty easy for them to see if your model is actually being fine-tuned on their feedback, or just on simply the prompts that they're typing in. and all of their data, so they can be building bots very easily that are sort of sending different feedback. And so it's important that you have a very safe filter there.
Yeah, definitely. It's more of like a safeguard for your model.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So I know I personally have built some demo apps with Streamlit, LLM apps here and there. So in terms of, I guess to delineate here for our viewers as well, you have a Streamlit component that Trubrics built that users can actually use that, and it's more of like it's not agnostic to any system. You can just use it, plug it into your app, and collect it and do whatever you want to do with the data in the back end. And you can explain this as well. And then you have the Streamlit, the Trubric side, where you just log in, build your app with the Trubric system, and then that way you're able to log in and actually view your logs and your analytics as well of how your model is doing. So I think that's pretty neat, and I think it's something that most people will like, especially because you want to have visibility on what you're building. So maybe you can explain to the, I know probably a lot of people here have questions, and I know most people are probably Streamlit devs here. So with the Streamlit component, can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we originally had kind of a Trubrics SDK that was like a Python SDK, and we had an integration with Streamlit embedded into our SDK, and that allowed, like I sort of explained just previously, it allowed users to integrate feedback components into their apps, and then upon clicking, it would automatically send data to Trubrics. And then we were kind of working on that, and we had quite a lot of like popular demand for people to say, okay, we really like these components, and we really want to integrate them into our apps, but we want to save our feedback data locally, or we want to save that within our organization, etc. And so what we did is we open sourced, like you were mentioning there, we open sourced our feedback components. And so now you can it's a Python library that you can go and install with a pip install. And yeah, by separating that out, we've kind of allowed sort of the community to build their own kind of backends and do what they want with their feedback. And they may be plugging that directly into an automated sort of retraining pipeline. But yeah, on the other hand, within the Trubrics SDK still, we use that component, that open source component, and then if you use the Trubrics SDK, you send the data directly to Trubrics, and then you can log in, you can create a free account. It's a hosted Streamlit app that you can use. You can create a free account today. And yeah, you can log in and analyze your feedback and analyze your prompts, etc.
Yeah, awesome. I think I got my work cut out for the weekend, updating my Streamlit apps, LLM apps to use Trubrics and get more analytics into what actually is happening to my app. And also for everybody in the audience, we'll share these details as well in the description after this, so you're able to go and access or find the documentation for this component and implement in your next app or in your previous apps. So in regards to this as well, Jeff, you probably touched on this as well, but just kind of to reiterate on this as well. What are the best practices for teams to collect and leverage user feedback effectively for their models?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say in terms of best practices, we really suggest that you start early. And so if you're building an LLM or working on a model, you really want to get a UI built as early as possible. And this is why Streamlit's so amazing for this, because it's apps in Python, and a lot of people who are playing around with LLMs, they are Python developers. So you have really no excuse to to not build a UI. And once you've got that UI, even if you're working on a custom LLM, throw in an open AI call to build your app, and that will allow you to get started really quickly before actually working and crafting out your LLM, and then you can immediately integrate Trubrics and actually start collecting feedback from any users. And this is really important. It's a really important step. It's what we always did as when I was consulting. you always want to get other people's opinion on your models, and especially people who have knowledge of the domain. So if you can get kind of your whatever it is that you're doing, if you're working, I don't know, in a med tech company, you want someone with experience in the specific medical domain that you're building your LLM for. And even if they're someone within your company, for example, like a product team, or on the business side, or a stakeholder, or even your founder, getting like a Streamlit app up and running is a really good way to start collecting their feedback on the LLM. And then you can do sessions of really just them experimenting with the model and collecting feedback. And this can be all done sort of internally. And then when you actually deploy to production, your process is very similar. You're carrying on that feedback mechanism to your production end users, because they can still actually bring you probably a lot of value. And yeah, I guess once you've kind of implemented that feedback, you'll also be able to sort of track your changes through the different versions of your model, and you can see if your model's regressing in terms of feedback, in terms of sort of user satisfaction or not. And then I guess the last thing I'd say, I've kind of said this already, but yeah, in terms of tips, don't constrain yourself to thinking about feedback necessarily for automated fine tuning. Start collecting feedback first. Try and understand the type of feedback that you're receiving, and then you can start saying, okay, well, actually, this is not much use to me, maybe, or this is really useful to me. And if it's not much use, then maybe I can change some of the feedback mechanism. I can start asking different questions. I can start having more of, I don't know, a survey type feedback form that I'm asking for my users. Or if it is useful, then ask yourself the question, okay, is this something that I wanted to retrain my model on? And yeah, the first thing I'd say really is understand your users before taking any action.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are some really nice tips there, and I think the one that stands out definitely is, when you build your app, Streamlit app, your LLM app, be sure to incorporate that feature in there so that you keep collecting the feedback and iterating. As you know, building any good product, you have to iterate and improve based on the customers, that are people that are using your product. And so, yeah, great tip there. And also, you had mentioned earlier that your entire MVP, Trubrics MVP, was built on Streamlit, which is real cool. And for those listening and viewing, if you've never used Streamlit before, I mean, it's amazing. If you know Python, you basically know Streamlit. It's just pretty much easier. So for Trubrics, what was kind of like the thought process that went into picking Streamlit for all the use cases so far that you've had? How was that process?
Yeah, so originally we actually had a full application built in JavaScript, and we had a deployed backend, and we were sort of realizing that the iteration on that with a small dev team, it was just kind of way too slow. So I guess the first big reason for us moving to Streamlit was speed of iteration. The second big the second, I guess, and this is probably the biggest one, is that we really wanted to work with the Streamlit community. And so community was a huge part of us actually building in Streamlit, because of the community that is in Streamlit, and especially we were looking at the generative AI community and people who were building apps with LLMs embedded. We really wanted to work as closely with them as possible. So we thought, okay, let's just actually build our whole MVP in Streamlit. And then, yeah, I guess touching back on the speed of iteration side of things. So when you're a small company, speed of iteration is so key. Like if your iteration cycles are a month, it's probably too long. If you can do them in week sprints, then you're doing good. And Streamlit is just such an amazing way to accelerate that. The first thing is because it's in Python. It's for Python developers, which a lot of people in the AI community are. It's very easy to get started, like you mentioned previously. And then something that I think is pretty underrated is Streamlit Cloud. Like the automated deployment of Streamlit Cloud is pretty phenomenal when you want to get apps out there really quickly, because there's no need for infra, there's no need for CI/CD. You literally push to GitHub, and within 5 minutes, your new app is redeployed to your Streamlit Cloud server, all for free. And yeah, it's for us, it was huge, and it's allowed us to basically strip back our product a lot, concentrate on exactly what we want to concentrate on, which is features and functionality for our users.
Yeah, awesome, amazing. Yeah, it's just interesting to hear these stories. We've definitely seen a lot of uptick in users using Streamlit just because it's pretty easy to use, straightforward, and it's kind of perfectly suited for LLMs as well. So with that as well, I just want to remind the audience, if you have any questions that come up, please put them in the chat. Just comment and we'll find these questions. And at the end of this session, we'll be able to answer your questions as well. And special shout out to Mohammed from Pakistan. Thank you. I see you in the audience. He commented. Thank you. And so Jeff, so kind of changing trajectories here a little bit, and talking about safety, responsible AI. So you authored a blog back in May of this year, and you did mention those two specific things: responsible AI and ethical AI. So can you maybe elaborate to us how Trubrix is contributing towards building responsible and ethical AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say responsible and ethical AI is not like our core value proposition, but it's definitely something that we're contributing to, in the sense that so responsible AI and generative AI is, for me, the biggest factor in those two is having a diverse team who are actually working on the model. If you have an AI team where there's just one developer working on a model, it's going to be pretty difficult for that developer to really make an ethical and non-biased model, just because they have their view on the world. And if you just take one person's view of the world, it's maybe ethical to them, but not ethical to the whole of humanity. So without getting too philosophical on this, I think the way we're really sort of contributing to that is that we're opening up, working on AI and working on these large models to not just technical profiles, but we're also opening up the field to sort of non-technical profiles. So like product managers, stakeholders of a specific team, any sort of business people or founders, for example, who want to get an understanding of how their models are actually being used in the real world. They can look at Trubrics and they can look at the analysis and the analytics that the Trubrics is providing, and they can say, okay, well, I've got sort of, this is my whole user base, and I can see that, let's say, this section of my user base is pretty happy, and they seem to be sort of really rating the generations of the LLM highly, whereas this section not so much. And we're kind of abstracting away from like sort of data science metrics, and really going into what matters, which is actually kind of how are your users viewing your model and your model generations. And so that's the first thing. We really sort of are diversifying who's getting interested in the topic of the actual development of the model. The second thing is that, and I kind of touched on this before, which is collecting and really sort of putting a point of listening to users. I mean, it was pretty outrageous how many people were flagging errors with ChatGPT as it was released. And I think, OpenAI I'd say they're pretty good dev team, but there was no way of them really realizing how many issues with ChatGPT there were before releasing it to the world, and really listening to their feedback. And so in terms of just actual feedback collection, that's already a huge kind of contribution to making more responsible and ethical models, because you're listening to people who you kind of maybe would have never sort of hired in your development team, but they're actually giving you advice, and they're giving you specific pointers into where your model may be biased or where it may be unethical.
Yeah, I think that's very important, and yeah, great example there of if they had kind of incorporated something like this in the beginning, that human
Mhm.
feedback loop. I think who knows, maybe we wouldn't have faced most of the challenges that came way in advance. So with that as well, what's on the horizon for Truebrooks? Are there any exciting features or integration that we can look forward to?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've actually just released now a sort of the prompts analytics page in Trubrics. So we've discussed mostly about user feedback and how we can log that and run some analytics in Trubrics. And one of the requests we had from our users was, it'd be really cool to see a similar thing for actual user prompts. And so we've just released that a couple of weeks ago, which is pretty cool. And right now, also, I'm working on an integration with LangChain. And so, yeah, that's another sort of popular demand feature. And yeah, that should be coming out in the next week. And yeah, in terms of kind of looking forward a bit, what we really are getting a bit excited about as well is so Truebricks, we collect feedback and user feedback on LLMs, but we would really like to have our own LLMs actually powering some of the analytics that is derived for our users. And so we've experimented with various different LLMs and trained on kind of user feedback data. And we've actually got a very basic model that's in beta at the moment, up in Truebricks, that allows you to kind of do like on demand analytics. And yeah, we see this being a massive plus for our users and anyone kind of working in the analytics space as well. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be very cool.
Yeah, awesome news for the community. New things to play around with and to enhance your apps for sure. And talking about feedback, it's great that y'all are providing feedback platforms for the users, but also using it yourselves, which is really amazing to see that. And with that as well, I'm guessing, and here's what you can elaborate as well, is you're collecting this feedback from the users already for TrueBricks and incorporating that into, how are you incorporating that feedback into your roadmap for like your future? And I know you've touched on this a little bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, yeah, I mean, it's been really well received, the Truebricks by the Streamlit community, which has been amazing. And we've had some integrations with some of the biggest kind of community Gen AI Streamlit applications, which has been really fun, really cool. And in terms of actually, yeah, the feedback that we've received and how that's impacted what we've been doing. So the user prompts was a big one. So logging and analyzing user prompts was a big one that the community asked for and that we delivered. The open source feedback component as well. That was something that's really cool and has allowed a lot of people to build sort of more interesting apps by sort of separating that actual feedback Streamlit component out of the Truebricks SDK, which is cool. And then we've also been working on a much tighter integration with the Streamlit chat elements. So originally, with the way that Streamlit was built, we had some issues kind of actually allowing users to line up different instances of feedback components with each generation in a chat. And now we've kind of fixed that problem. So it's really simple for users to display those feedback components with each chat element. And yeah, that tight integration with Streamlit is really cool now. So I definitely encourage you all to give it a try.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, definitely. Everybody in the audience, give it a try, provide some feedback, and then you end up getting more products, awesome products that you want to see as well. So with that, from your vantage point, at Truebricks, where do you see the industry heading? I know for me, the past year, the past 6 months has been like a blur because it seems like every week there's just something new coming out, and it's all of them are kind of mind blowing at the same time. So, where do you see from your vantage point where we're heading as an industry as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's pretty hard to answer. I think there's a lot of very plausible hypotheses that we could that we could chat about. I think the biggest change for us that we see is that um, LLMs are just they're taking a sort of a very center stage in terms of AI and in terms of different models, and not just AI, but in terms of actually all digital products. We're seeing kind of LLMs used in just such crazy different user digital products, and there's a whole interesting conversation around is the chatbot user interface, is that the new user interface, and is that like all we're going to need? And although I don't agree with that statement, as it's all we're going to need, I think we'll still need traditional apps. I think that LLMs and chat style user interfaces will play just a massive part in pretty much all digital products, whether that be for search or whether that be for anything that you want to actually find out about on the web in a digital format. And so for us, what's pretty interesting is that we're going to have we're going to be interacting with LLMs, I think, just pretty much everywhere we look. And in that case, as Trubricks, we previously were sort of trying to treat the whole AI use, the AI space, sorry, and we were sort of treating generative models and traditional models as well, and working on user feedback from the span space. But actually, we've kind of realized that as LLMs are going to most likely be the real interface for the user, and then that model might be then acting as an agent to query other models. Then our feedback is actually more centered around kind of how the user is interfacing with the LLM. Then
Yeah,
there's a whole piece on how the LLMs are actually querying different services. But in terms of what we really want to tackle in terms of user analytics, user insights, a lot of that will be directly around the LLM, because that's the interface that the users will be interacting with.
yeah, awesome. A lot of opportunities as well for people
Yeah.
to consider, and everything is changing, like you said. It's really hard to predict, but good shot at it there. I think that's kind of the direction that we want to see the industry head into as well. And I guess just a fun last question here for you. If Truebricks were a superhero in like an AI world, right, of which we're in an AI world, what would it be, and what would it be its superpower?
Um, so wow, Truebricks. I guess its superpower would be mind reading, because like I touched on before, um, a lot of users are not willing to sort of give their feedback, and really transfer interesting knowledge to the AI teams, because maybe they're not aware that the AI team actually needs that information. So I guess, yeah, if we had a mind reading superpower, then we could collect loads of user feedback without them even having to give it to us. So I guess that would be
Awesome,
our superpower.
awesome, awesome. Good choice. Awesome. So that that was very great first live show for us, and now we're just going to jump into the questions and try to answer as many as we can within the time that we still have. So the first question is from Unscripted Traveler. His question is, what is the current framework uh, to evaluate RAG based use cases?
Yeah, so there's a lot of work going into this. I know. So from our point of view, from like a pure user feedback point of view, um, as I just touched on actually previously, the user feedback and the like actual score that we use to evaluate a RAG system, we kind of will treat that as whether it be the LLM querying the vector database or the LLM responding to the user, we'll treat kind of the user satisfaction or the user feedback as just one big system. And so whether it be kind of evaluating RAG or evaluating just a regular LLM, in terms of user feedback, it doesn't change too much. Now I know there's kind of other I think there's a library called RAGAS. I'm just having a quick look. That's doing a lot of sort of evaluation work on RAG specifically. So maybe I can post that in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you get that?
Yes, I will post it as well. All right. All right, and we'll share this as well in the description after the call. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, definitely. And I think we also have a question again from Unscripted Traveler. What are your thoughts on fine tuning vector embeddings?
So I guess, like I said, at Trubrics, we're not really hung up too much on fine tuning. We sort of stop at the step before where we want to really provide the analytics and then actually say whether we can whether you should be using this feedback into your automated training pipeline. So yeah, I mean, it's difficult to answer. I think it's very use case dependent, and yeah, it's not something that us at Trubrics we're looking to tackle anywhere in the near future.
Yeah, awesome. And Krista has a question. Do you have any recommendations if the user feedback is actually inaccurate, or identify when it could be noise or biased?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and this is the whole thing that we've just started trying to tackle. And I guess again, sorry to be boring, but it's dependent on the use case, and there's kind of not one size fits all. But I think what I would say is for a recommendation, if you want to include user feedback, is really actually try and understand the different categories first of user feedback. And by actually categorizing and bucketing that user feedback, you will most probably, and what we've seen in our experimentation is you'll most probably be able to disregard a couple of categories of that user feedback, as a lot of the kind of the noise would be contained in them. On the other hand, what you might be able to do as well is actually include one or two categories of your user feedback into your model where you think that there is a kind of a weakness. But yeah, this is something that we're working on, and it's definitely not a simple answer.
Nice. Yes, definitely. I think you did pretty good answering that. So another question from Jerry's Tech. Probably said it wrong, but one question: is it possible to export the metrics collected with Trubrics? And I'm guessing that, yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, so it's possible to all data that is loaded in, so all feedback and all prompts data that you load in and that you save to Trubrics, you can export that directly from Streamlit. In terms of the actual metrics that we're computing, such as kind of, I guess what you mean is like a score of user feedback over a certain time period, let's say. At the moment, no, it's difficult to actually sort of create custom reports through Streamlit. It's something that we could do, and it's a good idea. I think, yeah, I think we should we should maybe take this one offline, but it's a good idea. I've got some ideas. My brain's going, but yeah, it's something that we'd need to include. It's definitely something that is in the roadmap for a future version. But it's kind of a bit difficult to do in Streamlit because sort of exporting or yeah, exporting data from like a graph, for example, is not that easy. But yeah, something that
Yeah,
we look to do in the future.
yeah, awesome. And yeah, I think Jerry's Tech is actually in our community, so a great person to get feedback from as well. And we'll take the last question here. Lang Labs has a question. So, what's the different about Truebricks compared to other LLM op tools? And I think you mentioned like Human Loop, Honeyhive, Agenta. Yep.
Yes, so great question. I guess the main difference would be that we are really focusing on, like I said, collection and analytics. Human Loop and Honeyhive, they're really sort of looking to build tools where you can collect feedback and then integrate that into some sort of fine tuning process. Whereas we're really convinced, and it's our conviction, that AI teams actually need to understand the feedback before thinking about how you can directly use that for fine tuning. And fine tuning is a pretty risky business and can, in a lot of cases, actually degrade your model. So before you're really wanting to fine tune, it's really important that you understand the data set. So that's why we're really providing and putting focus on the analytics block. Whereas Human Loop and Honeyhive aren't really focusing on that so much. And then in terms of kind of other like LLM ops tools, so I know you sort of Langsmith from LangChain, for example. They're all about sort of evaluation and monitoring of LLMs, and I really see us working with them. I think that we're not really a specific technical monitoring tool. We're really sort of a user analytics platform. And so you could actually use Langsmith for your monitoring of your latency, of your cost, and tracing all of your model prompts. And then you could actually export all of that data as well into Truebricks and do the analysis of, okay, this is what my prompts are actually trying to tell me about my users, and this is what the feedback's actually trying to tell me about my users.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Great questions today from the audience, and a great interview and information that you've provided to the community here, Jeff. So I want to thank you again for joining us today. And also, I want to thank the audience for joining us, listening, and learning as well. And we hope you gained valuable insights from our guest today. Stay tuned for more exciting interviews that we'll have. We'll plan to have this every month or even more often. And we'll have more discussions in a series that we have planned out. So also, don't forget to follow us on our social media, subscribe to our channels, and so you can get updates. Also, you can follow Truebricks as well. And with that, I just want to give it to you, Jeff, to give us some closing remarks here.
Yes. So first of all, thank you so much to Streamlit, to you, Tony, and to the whole team. Caroline, who I know is listening. You guys have been really instrumental in the beginning of our journey, and then to the community as well, the Streamlit community. We've got hundreds of users who have signed up from the Streamlit community, and it's really allowed us to actually prove out kind of what we wanted to build, and we've had some really great feedback. So yeah, I guess there's only one thing left for you guys to do is to start running some analytics on your users and get involved. We'd love to hear from you. And yeah, it's like I said, you can create a free account with Truebricks right now, and start logging your user prompts and your feedback.
Awesome. Yes, you heard it from Jeff himself. Please go ahead and we'll leave the links as well in the description. Get started today. Update your LLM apps so you can start receiving user feedback and make your apps better. And if you're planning on building one, please consider using it. And yeah, definitely excited to have had you today, Jeff, and everybody else for listening in. And until next time, see you and happy streamliting. See you. Bye bye.
Thank you, guys. See you later.